We don't make robots, but we make robots work better together.
What's been the biggest challenge or technical challenge in enabling interoperability across such diverse robotic ecosystems?
The promise was everyone speaks the same language and wouldn't it be a beautiful world, and it never happened. There's a lot of moving parts that go beyond the robot itself. How do you make all the pieces that have to come together, work in harmony? So being realistic, we said, okay, we're going to take a different approach.
How do you balance performance, reliability, and security when you're managing robots in the cloud?
InOrbit provides the 4 O's, and the first one is...
So, for your mornings, what fuels it? Coffee, tea, or something else?
I'm definitely on the coffee team. I think the day doesn't actually start without coffee, but that's all I have. Just strong coffee. I don't usually have any other kind of breakfast, and I'm usually just on my computer as I'm having the coffee.
Straight into it, coffee and work. Love it. And when you were a kid, what did you think you'd do when you grew up?
Oh, that's a good one. Look, I don't think as a kid you're like, oh, I'm going to be a founder. But I think I was always kind of like, I always like to tinker and to build. So some kind of builder, which is kind of what I'm doing now. So in a way, it's worked out.
Yeah. And what's one technology that you couldn't live without?
I think I've definitely become completely dependent on my smartphone. I don't think I can survive too long without it. I've unlearned things that I used to know how to do without it. So definitely used to know how to navigate kind of nearby cities, and now I'm like completely helpless.
So strange. I always said, because I moved to LA like 12 years ago, I was like, without Google Maps, I don't know what I would do in a place like this.
Right?
Yeah. So
and yet
dependent.
somehow people survive before it.
I just remember like maps and printing out directions or writing them down. Oh, it's crazy. Not very safe. And if you could fast forward 10 years and see one impact that your work has made on the world, what would you want it to be?
Yeah, I think I actually think about that one quite a bit. I think that we obviously work with robots, and I think robots have a multiplier effect. So the way I always think about it is we're going to have 1 billion robots positively impacting 10 billion people.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah, that's really cool. Look, welcome to Machine Minds. I'm your host, Greg Teresian, founder of Samson Rose, your robotics talent search partner. And on today's episode, I'm joined by Florian Pestoni, co-founder and CEO of InOrbit.AI. Thanks for being on the show today, Florian.
It's my pleasure. Great to be here.
I'm so glad we finally got this scheduled. Yeah, it's been a while coming. So let's jump into it. For those who don't know, you've had this awesome career before founding InOrbit. Can you walk us through the key experiences that led you here to this point?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is to some extent accidental, in that you kind of fall into an opportunity and then you make of it something that you don't always anticipate. So I started out in research. So I have a master's in EE and went pretty deep into technology, really arcane stuff like, image processing and cryptography. And then I knew there was something besides the technology itself that was important. So I decided to get an MBA at UC Berkeley, and that really broadened my horizons. And I think from there, I worked at some of the, large big tech companies that everyone recognizes, like Microsoft, Adobe, this company that used to be called Facebook. But I've also worked in various startups, some that I started, and I think that's a little bit unusual. I think people usually pick a track and stick to it, right? You're either climbing the corporate ladder or you're like off in startup land. And I think I'm a rare animal in that I think I see the value of both, of course. And I went into product management. I managed a product with 1 billion users. That's pretty good. I also started companies from an idea, so that's 0 to 1. And I would say at this point in my career, I'm really much more focused on 0 to 1, or maybe now 1 to 1,000,000 or 1,000,000,000,000. We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. Do you find one more interesting or impactful, or is it just like the type of work that draws you to like the 0 to 1?
I get bored easily, I guess, is the honest answer. So, working on making something 2% better than last year can be really, really impactful if you're talking about billions. But it's just not. I learned that it's not what I'm built for. I think it's the creativity of and the problem solving that comes with that 0 to 1. You can definitely do 0 to 1 at big companies as well, right? But so I'm not in any way kind of disregarding that, but I think different people are built differently, and once you discover what makes you tick, I usually recommend that people stick to it.
Yeah, makes a ton of sense. So what was the spark that inspired you to launch InOrbit, and how did the founding team actually come together?
Yeah, I think I would absolutely blame my co-founder for getting me involved. So Julian was working. So he worked at Willow Garage, which people who watch your podcast probably know is where a lot of kind of like the modern approach to robotics, from Ross to a lot of these other great developments came from, and a lot of modern robotics companies were started by people who worked at Willow Garage. Um, and the insight there was this kind of wave of new companies with smarter autonomous robots, but the infrastructure to manage that at scale just kind of wasn't there, right? And if you think about it, you're starting a new company, you're a roboticist. All the cool kids want to work on the robot, right? The infra takes almost like a second place, and that's where my background prior to founding InOrbit was in very high scale, cloud-based applications. And so the concept was, how do we bring the scale of the cloud to robotics? So that's the kind of the origin story. I think we've evolved quite a bit since then, and now have broadened our horizon.
Awesome. So for the listeners who might not know, can you tell us a bit more in detail what InOrbit does and who do you primarily serve?
Yeah, absolutely. We are a platform for robot orchestration. And we are at InOrbit.AI. And as I like to say, we were .ai before it was Go. So AI has always been part of our DNA. And if you want to kind of like wrap your head around InOrbit, think of it as kind of the orchestrator. How do you make all the pieces that have to come together, work in harmony? And it's not just about the robots, right? So robots don't operate in a vacuum, and especially the kind of robots that we work with, which are autonomous robots, they're usually interacting, whether it's with people, with other equipment, with software. So there's a lot of moving parts that go beyond the robot itself. So the kind of customers we work with are typically larger enterprises that have really complex needs. Usually, of course, there's a physical aspect to what they do, right? They're in the physical world, they have physical operations. And and they're looking to either improve them, make them more efficient, make them more reliable, get greater insights. So robots can help with all of that. But again, we try to look at the overall system, and we know that the robots are just one component there.
Yeah, yeah. So that's the robot orchestration platform. If you were to explain what that means in practice, like for your customers and stuff, and looking at all the other elements that go into that, how does that play out?
Yeah. So the short version that I give people is we don't make robots, but we make robots work better together. And again, if you dive deeper, it's everything from so we become like a single pane of glass for all of your robots, right? So everything from collecting data, and as you know, robots generate massive amounts of data. So collecting is one part, making sense of it is what really matters. So how do we bring you insights? There's a deep operational aspect, which is have the greatest robot, but it runs out of battery and it becomes a paperweight. So there's a kind of like the day-to-day running of the operations, and in unstructured or semi-structured environments, the physical world is chaotic. So something is going to go wrong, so you need to be prepared for it. All the way to we actually tell the robots what to do. So we actually connect to, again, with our customers, there's usually some sort of enterprise system that knows the work that needs to be done, right? So in a warehouse, it might be a warehouse management system or an order management system. At a plant, manufacturing plant, it might be a manufacturing control system or an ERP. So there's always some software that knows what work needs to be done. Our job is to translate those orders into robot missions. So we then send the robots on their way, and we collect more, like we track the KPIs about operations. And then we're able to do this across vendors, right? So we are robot agnostic. So if in your operation, and some of our customers have this, you may have, let's say, a picking robot, a pick assist robot, but you also have a forklift, maybe autonomous, maybe manually driven. And you also need to clean the floor, so you may have a autonomous floor scrubber. And making all of that work together is quite a challenge. And it's the kind of thing that each vendor is completely focused on their robot. They think their robot is the best robot there is, and why would anyone need another one? But as I like to say, there's no Apple of robotics where everything, just fits together. So we provide that layer of connectedness, and again, at the end of the day, if you're running a plant or a warehouse, you don't really care what's inside the robots. You care about the work that the robots do for you, and that's really our focus.
Awesome. So it sounds like there's quite a few differences from traditional fleet management or point-to-point integrations as well that you mentioned there. Is that normally what you come up against when you're selling to a customer or looking at overhauling their existing system? It's like the traditional fleet management stuff?
Fleet management is a term that I think has been abused. It's kind of like digital twins. They could mean almost anything these days, and it's hard for people to have like clear expectations of what they're getting. I would say amongst the things we do fleet management, but it's kind of like part of functionality versus who we are. And I think some of the differences are, again, as I said, the depth of data collection, the depth of insights that we produce, and how we make it all work together. But we're not competing against fleet managers. So, like, for example, we work with all kinds of robots. And many dozens of types of robots, so from different vendors. And over time, we've developed different ways to work with this ecosystem of robotics partners. Of course, if they're ROS-based, we have ROS components for it, and it just talks to us natively. But a lot of vendors have APIs. A lot of them have fleet managers, right? So you buy your robots from vendor A, and it comes with its fleet manager. We're happy to talk to it. And in fact, we do that all the time, right? We'll talk to the vendor fleet manager, and then it can talk to its robots. But usually what you don't get is somebody that makes a material handling robot and a fleet manager wanting to also manage a cleaning robot or a manual forklift, or, do a lot of the kind of like deeper software integration. It's very focused on, here are, these like 20 robots, they're managed by this equipment. So for us, it's just another way to talk to the robots.
Interesting. Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Robotics companies, they often build hardware and some in-house software as well. Why is a dedicated operations platform like InOrbit.AI critical for end users as they scale?
Yeah, so I think maybe if you're an end user, you really care, like I said before, about the work that the robots can do for you, right? And building something that is completely custom and one-off for this one robot means if you then buy a different robot, you need to start over. That's the traditional way. So that's going to limit scaling in a particular plant, right? The ability to integrate newer technologies is limited. It's slower. But also, if you look globally, I think most of these deployments are really thought of like, well, here's this one warehouse or this one factory, and I'm deploying 10 robots and they need to work. But if you're a large company, you have 50 sites, or if you're a retailer, maybe you have thousands of sites. And you really need some way to have visibility, or I like to talk about InOrbit provides the 4 O's. And the first one is observability. You need to know what's happening. The next one is operation. You have to deal with problems when they occur and make sure that you're maintaining, a high utilization. And then you get into the kind of like more detailed orchestration and ultimately optimization. So those are my 4 O's, and everything we do is going to fall into one of them in some way or another. So again, from a end user's perspective, it's less about, I bought these 10 robots, I need to get them to work. And it's more like, I have thousands of robots distributed across the globe, maybe millions, right? Amazon already has 1 million. So I think other people will have large deployments as well. And they're all over the world, as I mentioned, and you need a platform to manage all of that complexity.
Yeah. So what's been the biggest challenge or technical challenge in enabling interoperability across such diverse robotic ecosystems?
Yeah, we actually had to invent a lot of things, a lot of ways to solve that problem. There's a lot of diversity in technical diversity, and rather than, so our approach was our approach to interoperability was, rather than force everyone to speak the same language, right? Like an Esperanto of robotics, which how Esperanto, like, do you speak it? I don't, right? But the promise was everyone speaks the same language and wouldn't it be a beautiful world, and it never happened. So being realistic, we said, okay, we're going to take a different approach. We're going to let each robot speak whatever language they want, and we're going to be Google Translate for robots. And again, we had to, develop new ways to do that kind of translation. And these days, because we did it, the old-fashioned manual way to learn, now we can onboard a new robot using AI in almost no time. And I think that's really, it took us, it's a journey to get there, but that's really part of our differentiation is how broad our ecosystem is and how flexible. Of course, if there's more alignment in the industry, I think that's a good thing. And I actually contribute to standards, and I'm always advocating for that. So I think maybe in the future we'll have a little bit more alignment, but right now we're focused on providing the broadest possible coverage of devices, of robots.
That's great. Yeah, you can think from like quite a complex environment, whether it's manufacturing, logistics. If you've got different robots, different operating systems, etc., it's probably like a hindrance or a roadblock, right? To look at a platform like yours, if you don't speak to everything, you don't want it to just do part of it, or just one robot system is just recreating the wheel for no reason. That's awesome. How do you balance performance, reliability, and security when you're managing robots in the cloud?
Yeah. Again, so going back to my 4 O's. So the first one in performance, you have to start with observability. You have to know what's happening, not just superficially, but in depth, right? Uh, and be able to derive insights from this like avalanche of data. So when talking about performance, I really think about it in terms of continuous improvement and being able to keep driving that loop, whether it's human learning or machine learning. There's always improvements you can keep making, but you can't do it if you don't know what's going on. I think obviously security and safety, which are distinct but both tremendously important. I think so our approach is we can secure our application, our platform. Fun fact, early in my career, I worked in areas like cryptography and security. So it wasn't so much, an afterthought or a bolted on idea, which is sometimes the way it happens, but for us, it was, built from the ground up, with those concepts. On the other hand, we don't get involved in the kind of like the safety aspects of the robot, especially a mobile robot operating in its environment. And that's a conscious decision. We're typically not in the loop of the robot, so we wouldn't be, it wouldn't be up to us to, let's say, hit an e-stop or something like that. So again, that's why we try not to interfere with the natural way in which the robots operate, as designed by the different vendors. And they're the ones who can make the best decisions in terms of like what sensors to use and how to apply it. So we're like one level higher from our perspective.
Makes sense. I guess also a lot of that is to do with the environment it's going to be used in and the use case of the robot, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, and highly recommend doing safety assessments and all of that work. We usually come in after that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Where do you see the biggest barriers to broader robot adoption today, and how is InOrbit helping remove them from your side?
I think robots are still complex. I think that's improving tremendously, and it's a lot easier these days to, I would say, program a robot, or define the behavior that you want the robot to execute. And that's advancing, even faster. There are, these new methods like, VLAs that are being used, which is exciting. And, we'll see how they're deployed in production. But I think there's still an aspect of, it doesn't matter how smart an individual robot can be. You still need to get them to work together and play nice with each other and with the environment in which they're operating. I think that's where we're focusing our efforts. And maybe, here's an analogy that I often think about, which is, if you go back maybe to industrial robots, right, in a manufacturing line, the robots were clearly equipment, right, and they're an asset. I think when you give robots intelligence, you give them agency, right, which is the whole point of being autonomous. You're basically giving them a job and trusting them to do it to some extent. So in a way, they're becoming part of the workforce, right? Versus just plant equipment like a building. They're more akin to workforce. And of course, they're going to work side by side with the human workforce. I think what's been missing is a platform to really manage that workforce. And again, I use that analogy because, like, some people will say, well, the robots are getting smarter. Why would they need an orbit? It's like, well, humans are pretty smart already. You still need, management and tracking and software to do that. And all big companies have some sort of, people ops software, what used to be called human resources software. So if you have people ops, our whole idea was you're going to need robots, right, for robot operations.
Right. Yeah, makes a ton of sense. And I mean, when you look at it like that, because I hadn't thought about it like that, but it makes perfect sense, especially from a workforce standpoint. And you want to see throughput, metrics, reliability, etc. If it makes sense to double down on a certain area or cut back. So yeah, it's a no-brainer. You mentioned before that you are contributing to standards and stuff like that, and you've also positioned InOrbit as a strong advocate for those open standards and collaboration. Why do you see that as so essential?
Look, we don't need the standards because we've already built the Google Translate for robots, and we're already doing it today. But I think for the industry to mature and to get to the next level, I think it can't be this kind of like every robot is a universe unto itself. I think having standards that, make it more efficient for robots to work together, to work with the environment in which they're operating. I think that's a natural step in the maturity of the industry. So I think that makes sense. It makes sense for the industry. And look, ultimately, if there are more robots out there, then that's good for us. It grows the pie, and we're happy to grow the pie and then, compete for the slices.
Yeah, no, I think it's the right way of thinking about it, in all honesty. You get a lot of, and you see with the hype of AI as well, and every company doing it. All right, well, we're closed off. We're not going to be open source. And everyone's like, well, no, we're advocating for open source. And that's just increasing the use cases and adoption and players. Yeah. So
yeah, I think the flip side is standards move very slowly, right? By their very nature, right? You need to get a bunch of people to agree in the first place, which is no easy task. And then there's the adoption aspect across the industry. So I think the approach that we're following is we're creating the state of the art, and then the standards will learn from it and will lag usually. And then what we've seen in other industries is once a standard, kind of like comes together, then it drives more momentum in that industry. So I think that's really, I really see it as, like a kind of like a boost for the industry as a whole versus a solution for a problem that we don't know how to fix.
Yeah, makes sense. From your perspective, how has the industry changed, the robotics industry, since you started InOrbit, and where do you see it heading in the next 5 years?
I would say the current excitement around physical AI, I think, is incredible. And to be clear, it's not new, right? It's not something that was invented with ChatGPT, but I think it's definitely accelerating. And people are, things that used to take years to do, right? Like where you would need to, even using, machine learning, right? You would need to collect data, annotate it, then run it. It was very manual effort. And then you had a model, and it was usually very specific to that problem you were trying to solve. Let's say you're trying to detect forklifts in the space where the robot is operating. You could do it. It was just slow and painful and costly. Now it's like it just comes pre-trained, right? And you can just prompt it, and it will do that plus a million other things, right? I usually, I was talking to someone the other day about this, and they're like, well, but I mean, you can do that, right? It's like, yeah, but imagine, and this is kind of my made up example, right? Imagine you're operating a warehouse. Detecting forklifts makes sense. Let's say, I don't know, like a turkey walks in, right? Like, how can you plan for that? But maybe, with these pre-trained models, you can say, what is that? And it's like, it looks like some kind of bird. And it's like, it looks like a turkey. Would you like some recipes for Thanksgiving? It's like, no. So you went in the wrong direction. But so you have to learn how to work with it.
Yeah. Good example. You never know when a turkey's going to walk on the floor. Building in robotics, it obviously requires a strong mix of software, hardware, domain expertise, and everything. I am obviously very focused on the hiring aspect here. So I'm curious, from your career and how you go about building your company, what's your approach to building the right team when it's so multifaceted and needs people from every area?
Absolutely. And I think part of it is, at a startup, you need people who can wear multiple hats, right? Because if you're very precisely defining a role, then it's probably wrong, right? So that's one aspect. I think it also takes a kind of person that is going to thrive in the kind of constant reinvention that you're doing, right? And I don't like to call it uncertainty because that has negative connotations, but it's like, it's changing all the time. And if you're not, if you want stability and doing the same thing over and over, then a startup, and particularly in robotics, is not the place, right? It's changing all the time. So I think that's one aspect. We developed a set of values that kind of it wasn't, we went on a retreat and we said what would look good on the wall. It was things that kind of decanted from the early days of the company. And I think the two that I usually kind of my touchstone are, we're builders first, right? And I think what that means for us is process and all of that is important, but what brings us together is building a better product, a better world. And then the other one that I usually try to adopt, for my work as founder, but I try to kind of like instill in everyone at the company is planetary scale, right? We're here to have impact, and yes, we need to, help a customer solve problem A, but we need to always go back to, if this customer has this problem, there's probably 10,000 other customers out there are going to have a similar problem. How can we solve that in the broad sense of the world versus solve this one specific problem and then start over when you go to the next one, right? So I think those are kind of, when in hiring, those are two things that I try to test for, right? Is there that ambition, right? Of trying to, here in the Valley, we always like to say, we're here to change the world. And, that sounds like self-aggrandizing. So I think it's like, I really think of it as, we're here to have, global scale, global impact. And then, so that's on the ambition side. And then on the kind of like, what does it look like every day? You need to be willing to build.
Yeah. Is obviously those are like the intentional things that you look for and screen for universally. Have you noticed any common traits among the best people that you've hired, like outside of what you're looking for initially, once you've got them on board or a couple of years in?
I think it's willing to go beyond. And I think that's always been the trait. And it's not for everyone, right?
Yeah.
Some people just want a little bit more like, okay, define kind of like where I can operate. And best people are willing to go beyond. And if it's like, an engineer jumping on a plane to go meet with a customer,
Yeah. Just have to be in it.
instead of hiding behind their monitor, or maybe it's someone in sales who goes deep on AI, right? So they can have a more meaningful conversation with customers, right? So there's always, I feel, kind of like something you can, if you're really motivated, you can go beyond the limitations and even beyond your own kind of like what you think of as your own limitations, and grow and develop.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, what you said about that uncertainty, it does have negative connotations, but like that uncertainty, that ambiguity, it is something that you just have to be comfortable in, and you have to be able to operate in, if you're, especially in your own onboarding sometimes, or getting up to being a productive team player, team member. You have to like sometimes create your own role, take on extra work, and just find out where you fit in and run with it, right? And that, to your point, isn't for everyone. Some people need a very clear job description, a pigeonhole section to operate within, and which is fine, and everyone operates differently. And sometimes it's a stage in life thing, like, hey, I've done the crazy ambiguity thing. I need something a little bit more defined for my next phase. But you'll end up back there most of the time. Like, being in a startup is addictive, being in that world.
And if we go back to the kind of like the conversation we're having at the very beginning, I've been on both sides of that. So, sometimes you do want the kind of like more predictable, kind of like step by step. Sometimes you want something else. And so that's why I always say it's not for everyone. There's nothing wrong with you if this is not what you want, and maybe it's not what you want or what you need at this moment in your life, and it might change in the future. But yeah, I think for me, it's become kind of like, this is my path. This is my journey.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. What advice would you share with founders trying to attract top talent in a startup environment, technical or non-technical?
I think there's the obvious pieces, like share your vision, um, you know, paint the picture of what the work will look like, when you succeed. But maybe the one that you don't hear as often is just be real, right? I usually I have this conversation with everyone we hire about kind of like I always want to scare them away from InOrbit, right? And tell them all the things that could go wrong. And it's not because I don't want them to join. It's because I want them to join knowing what they're getting into, right? Uh, Eyes wide open, exactly. So I think that's maybe not something that a lot of people do. And to me, it's like, I think it's doing the candidate a service, but it's also doing ourselves a service, right? Because if you sign up with different expectations, then you're not going to be happy, and if you're not happy, then you're not going to do a great job. So I think it's in our interest as well as our team members' interests to find that fit.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think it's so important to do that and over-index on it. And something that just came to mind as well when you were talking about clearly defined roles or over-defining the role. Sometimes writing a job description and communicating a job, especially if it's the first one you're hiring in a company and you haven't done it before, and making it more skeleton, like don't have every single part of it defined and just put that in there black and white for the outside world to see, like, hey, this is the first role we're hiring, so likely to change, likely to add stuff to it, and you need to be okay with that. You need to be looking for your way to add value and fit in with the team in a work capacity.
Yeah, there's actually a few things that we do with that. If you want to dig a little deeper, one is so I mean we have job descriptions because you need to know what work needs to be done. We actually fine tune job descriptions to the individuals as opposed to the other way around, and we actually involve them in helping craft their job description.
This is for every employee,
Um,
or like the first time you're hiring?
I think it depends. So the more senior the role, the more we have to do this, right? And to me, it's like really helping play to their strengths, because a startup is definitely a team effort, and um, there's always more work that needs to be done than there are people around to do it. So finding something that people are really good at, then that makes sense. So we try to fine tune as much as possible the role, both before hiring as well as after. Um, and like we'll literally fine tune what's in the offer letter to a person. Obviously, when you have when you're hiring thousands of people a week, then
Yeah, it's more
that
difficult.
may not scale as much. But that's the benefit of being I know say startup. And the other thing is, we do a 30, 60, 90 onboarding plan. And usually, the first month, there's a lot there because they have to, absorb a lot of information. I always have you know, have a quick win in the first 15 days. Even it doesn't matter how big it is, right? That's not the point, but it's like show that you're here. But then for 60 and 90, it becomes more kind of like a framework. And part of the job of the first 30 days is to flesh out kind of your goals for 60 and 90. And so the effect that has is one of ownership, right? You're not just checking boxes because you put the boxes there in the first place, right? So again, these are things that we're able to do as a startup that at some point may need to become more like process-based, perhaps.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely makes the people more accountable and involved, and then increases their engagement or fast tracks their engagement. I know you wanted to, we spoke about this offline, like do a demo, and I have some more questions, but I'd love to try and fit that in because I'm also conscious of the time. So if you wanted to do that. And for anyone just listening to audio, jump forward to this part in YouTube. If you want to see it, it would be great.
So I'll try to jump into it very quickly,
Cool.
but I think this merits a little bit of background. So, we were talking about orchestration and all of that. It feels very abstract, right? And
Yeah.
I think we're a software platform, so abstraction is natural, but a lot of our customers operate in a very physical world. So what we wanted to do is be able to show them what that might look like. And instead of doing a canned demo, which, they're easy to fake, or to cherry pick maybe, we actually do live demos. We do hundreds of demos a quarter.
Wow.
Live from something we created that we call the robot space. So I'm going to start projecting for people who are watching the video. This is literally InOrbit. And again, the whole idea is to give you total visibility over your robots and over your equipment, wherever they are. So we usually start with this kind of like global view, and I can zoom in on where I am right now, which is the robot space. And now I go from that kind of like global view to kind of almost like Google Earth view to we're operating inside a facility. And to give people a little bit of a sense of what we're looking at, we actually can integrate with cameras. And I'm going to show you a live view of the robot space, which we have distributed in multiple areas. And you can already see we have a bunch of robots. So this one here is a cleaning robot. This is a pick assist robot. We have material handling. We have a forklift over here, or a manual pallet jack. The question is, how do you make all of this work together? So what we'll typically say is, okay, you can get the how's my fleet going kind of view. This is very ops centric. Remember, we're talking about operations.
Mm-hmm.
If you talk to ops people, they never really care about the happy robots. They only want to know what's happening with my robots. Where do I need to pay attention? What problems is a robot having? But then, you can get lots of data. Remember, I talked about data. But what I really wanted to show is something that when we first started showing this, people said, that's not possible. And then that's the value of showing instead of telling. So here, what you can see is an inside or a diagram of the inside of our robot space. And these little avatars represent different robots. So for example, just to show you, can send this robot, set a waypoint for it, move it over here. And then as the robot starts moving, you can see it moving. You can see through the eyes of the robot. And here's the third person view. That's the little robot that I sent on its path. So imagine this could be happening anywhere in the world, and you have this level of control.
That is awesome.
But, most of the time you want robots to be doing something more kind of like more complex than just moving around and having to teleoperate it like we did. So maybe what I can do is I can select this cleaning robot, right? And one thing you'll notice is these are completely different robots. They're all essentially on the same map, as you can see. So let me see. I can run a route. And this is like a predefined mission for this robot. And it does take a second to start, but then we'll see it start to move. Let me move this one out of the way too. Anyway, so as we wait for this robot to start, let me go even higher level. There it is. You can see it moving. Even more than having these predefined missions, right? While this one is cleaning, we're going to want to do a few other things. Usually in a warehouse, remember, I talked about enterprise systems actually knowing what to do. And, let's define some more complex behavior here. So instead of starting from the robot, we're going to start with a warehouse management system. And in this case, I'm going to, so we do work with automotive companies. So in the WMS, I'm going to place an order. And again, this is not our WMS. It's a kind of like general purpose WMS, and we can work with anyone's. So here, what I can do, let me make sure the other robot is out of the way. Yep. So I'm going to place an order. And what will happen is that order then, InOrbit will take that order and, as I mentioned, translate it into actual work. So here, for example, oh, by the way, I think I missed something, but my colleague was actually, moving this forklift. You saw that little robot is going to this location, but I really want to show you this, which is really cool. Hope I don't miss it. 1 second. Here. So I can show you the inside of a goods to person grid. And here, you'll see these robots are actually moving moving totes around. So this is a system from a company called InStock. We have installed here, and I think you have an episode with Yegor in the past. So here you actually see it working, and the robot is now going to show up at this workstation. And then my colleague is playing the role of an associate at a warehouse who works at one of these workstations. What they're doing is they're going to pick that fuel filter from here and put it on a robot. And then they interact with InOrbit through a tablet and send the robot back to shipping. And there it goes, happily moving towards its destination. So this is, a lot of things happened here. There was an order that was placed, which you can see is an order in progress. That order was translated into a mission. There's a robot that's executing that mission and going step by step. So all of this can be done dynamically and through software. And I think that's really what I think is really powerful, is we're moving some of these things into the virtual world. The last thing I wanted to show real quick is, that 2D kind of like bird's eye view of the map is great, but sometimes you need, a richer environment. So what we've done is we've created a 3D representation of the robot space. So that's the same thing we were seeing before But now this is almost like a video game version of the robot space. So I can really navigate freely through it. And this allows me to build kind of like advanced simulations. And, we work with some companies like NVIDIA. I think it's really powerful. Something like this would have been almost unheard of like a few years ago. So we're really pushing the limit of what you can do.
This is so cool. Thanks for sharing it. Yeah, we haven't had anything like that on the show before. So that's awesome to see firsthand and see other companies that we're aware of, right? How their products fit into it. So that's really cool.
Yeah, we're definitely trying to build this ecosystem. So here at the Robot Space, we have robots from our global ecosystem. I call it the United Nations of Robots because we have US, Germany, Korea, Denmark, so really India. So really try to bring all the pieces together and show how we can all get along.
Love that. If you could wave one magic wand and instantly unlock a capability for robots globally, what would that be?
I think again, this idea of becoming easier to use. I think we're on the cusp of seeing robots show up in lots of places where, it was unthinkable. We're really focused on B2B, so I'm not going to comment about, I would say in social gatherings, people ask me when am I going to have a robot that can, fold the laundry, and I'm like, that's a hard problem, a hard question, and I don't know that I can help with that. But certainly, we're seeing robots showing up and tackling new tasks, and for that, they need to become easier to program or easier to define their behavior. Programming may even kind of like not be the right way to think about it, right? If you're prompting a robot, is it programming or is it something else? But it's this idea, like I was saying, if you think of them more as a workforce, how would you work with your robot workforce?
Yeah, I love that. Well, look, thank you so much for your time. I know that we are over, but I hope you don't have anything you need to run to. I really appreciate the demo.
Put a little bit of buffer just in case.
Great. One last question then before you go. What's a book, podcast, resource, or any piece of like advice that you think every robotics founder should check out?
So, I really care about scaling, right? That's kind of like what drives what we do. And I've been actually rereading a book from like, I want to say a decade ago, called Blitzscaling. Reid Hoffman and Chris Ye are the authors. And it was definitely written for, like the Airbnb story or the LinkedIn story. I really spend a lot of time thinking about how do we bring that kind of growth to robotics, right? And I think I'd like to see, I think there's a new crop of robotics founders that are thinking along those lines. So I would put this in a oldie but goodie kind of like, because 10 years in Silicon Valley is like 100 years anywhere else. But I think I'm rereading it and I find it so relevant. It's a different way of thinking about it. So maybe that's an unusual recommendation, but I think I definitely see software and hardware becoming kind of like the scalability of software infecting hardware.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's a great one. And obviously Reid's got his podcast Masters of Scale as well, which is great if you're more of a listener than a reader, then that or the audiobook version. Well, look, Florian, thank you so much again. This has been awesome. Great to learn more about the company, what you guys do, your vision for the future, and how you're helping out in the wider ecosystem. And again, thank you for the demo. How
Can
can
I
I list?
ask you a question?
Yeah,
So
please.
you're just going back to this idea of robots as workforce. Are you going to expand your company and start hiring robots now?
When a robot can recruit, then maybe. I'm still a big believer that recruiting is a people business. So you need people definitely in the loop. At least we use AI in certain areas, but I'm not a big fan of like not having a human in the loop when you're trying to find people to do people jobs.
I'm with you 100%. I think AI gives us scale and the ability to do more, but you still need to have people working together. Even in this agentic AI world, where maybe the job of someone is to kind of like direct the work of these software agents, I think you still need someone with judgment.
100%. Yeah, because I mean, there's so much left up for interpretation, especially when it comes to hiring, right? Or research, that if you just leave it completely up to an agent, you're going to get very mixed results. You need human eyes on it and at least some sort of review. There's stuff, like you said, for scale, speed, and maybe like the admin and research side that we can utilize it for. But most of it, we have to have a pulse on what it's doing. Yeah, I don't think you could get rid of that at all. Not right now, anyway. And I'm definitely not a big fan of like speaking to an AI bot, like virtually, verbally, anything like that. I want to, if I want a human, I want a human. Maybe I'm old school, but
I think it's going to be interesting to see if there's a new generation that feels more comfortable actually talking to artificial entity.
I think it's coming because it's a different client of mine was saying, and they were building like a companion enabled like plushie for kids. So it's AI, you can communicate with it, you can text to it and speak. And the perspective was, this is the, for my generation, we were the first generation to grow up with like widely used internet. Before like my parents' generation, it was the first time like TV was around and stuff like that. So this generation, and then the one below me was like social media. Before that, it didn't really exist, right? So this is, the kids now are going to be the first generation to grow with AI. Like even my kids, my wife speaks to Chat GPT. She calls it Soul. That's her name. And my daughters are like, ask Soul like this question. So it's there. That's all they know now, right?
Right.
So
Right.
yeah, I think there'll be a point, and it's coming, where that's just second nature. Like we would Google something, they would just be like, "Let me talk to my AI assistant or companion."
Yeah. And then they'll think kind of like the way we were thinking at the beginning of the show about like, how did people find a way around LA
Exactly.
without Google? It's like, how did people live without some sort of assistant, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, I think it's going to be fascinating. I'm a big believer in the next generation being able to drive that. And we don't yet have alpha in at work, but they're coming. Uh,
Yeah.
and I think Gen Z is going to be awesome.
Yeah. Definitely is. If it makes me want to ask you one more question. I know I keep saying one more, but if you could have a personal robot assistant for one part of your daily life right now, what would that be? Or what would it do?
Uh, Okay, so I think you may know this about me, but I'm into pizza and I love it. I love to make it. I don't want to give that up. I think there's something magical about, working with dough, and it's kind of like it gets me out of the digital world and into the physical world. But there are parts of like if you're kind of like baking or you're growing sourdough, like these things that are not the creative part. It's the kind of boring. I have to turn over my dough one more time. So, yeah, I think a pizzaiolo assistant is what I would wish for as a new robotics thing. Maybe that's going to be my next startup.
Side project. You heard it here first.
Also,
Awesome.
great,
Well,
great
look,
talking to you, Greg.
yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. Where can our listeners find out more about you and follow on for everything you guys are doing at InOrbit?
Yeah, definitely InOrbit.AI and InOrbit Space Intelligence is the name of our product. And we are at trade shows. We're going to be at Automate, a robo business. So you can
Nice.
find us there in the flesh.
Perfect.
Or you can come visit us at the robot space here in the heart of Silicon Valley.
Love that. Well, I'll see you at Robo Business anyway, and we'll put those links in the notes. And yeah, thank you again.
Fantastic. Thanks, Greg.